Hello, everyone. I am Jaie Laplante, Artistic Director of Doc NYC, and welcome to our Doc NYC Spring Showcase presentation of Pretty Baby Brooke Shields. Thank you so much to Hulu for making this possible. And I am joined by our filmmaker, Lana Wilson, and of course, the incomparable Brooke Shields. So welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thanks.
So my first question is for you, Brooke. What made this the right time for this project for you? And had you been approached for, any type of documentary about your life beforehand, or like what was it about right now that made this right?
I have been approached quite a few times, and um, it just the tone was never right. It just didn't. It felt premature for some reason. But first of all, because of the team involved, I knew it would be an artistic endeavor. I knew that it would be representative. I believed it would be fair. Allie's Wentworth is one of my best friends, and her husband is brilliant. And they really, I knew that they were going to be loving to me for the process of it, and that they wanted to make a a bigger story rather than just my life. And where I am in my life right now, my daughters are grown. One's already in college, and I'm looking at this next phase, and really ready to really begin new chapters in my life. And it felt like the right time to sort of close this one. And once I knew that we were lucky enough to have Lana, I just thought, we are off to the races, and I'm going to completely trust, and I'm going at this leap of faith, and I'm giving it all to Lana, and I am not in control.
It sounds like you're about to get on like a roller coaster to do
Oh,
some
I did.
movie stunt.
I did. It was like skydiving, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't need to now.
That's a good one. Lana, what was it about? What interested you in making Brooke's story your next film? What was it?
Yeah.
That
Well, I
important?
was really interested in Brooke's personal story, which I knew a little bit about and found really moving and profound and surprisingly relatable because I'd read both of her books. But I was also interested in this bigger cultural story of what the symbol Brooke Shields meant at different points in time. Because one of the things I took away from my very first meeting with Brooke was how she had felt so reduced to a singular thing at different points in time, and that thing might be changing, but I think she had this larger experience of both professionally and personally, people not really seeing her in all of her dimensions and for all of her depth. And even the fact that contradictory sides of one person can all exist in one person. And so I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have her personal story, but to interweave that with this bigger story that really is about what American society thought and was working through about girls and women at different points in time. And part of that was inspired by meeting Brooke, and part of that was inspired by this hard drive that she handed over to me that was 50 years worth of photos, videos, thousands of pieces of material that I started to look through. And I was really surprised that when I looked at Brooke at age 12 on the press tour for Pretty Baby, I was surprised to recognize a really contemporary dynamic in that footage, this dynamic where this girl who's about to become a teenager is being both praised for how beautiful she is and how mature she is and her sensuality and the way she looks, but also criticized for being too sexual, for going too far. And I thought that that double standard is something we're still living in a lot of ways. So I was excited to approach this from the perspective of 2023.
Oh, it's great. I want to start at the end of the film and then actually work our way back. There's the family dinner scene at the end of part two is it's so remarkable. It gave me the sense of what impact Brooke's story has for a new generation of young women, such as of course Brooke's daughters, but also for the current generation of parents. And I was wondering what you both hope that parents of teenage girls today will take away not only from that family dinner that we were so privileged to be able to listen to, but the film in total.
Hmm. Well, I can start and then I'll let Brooke share her thoughts. But yeah, one thing with that scene that was so striking and inspiring to me was this dynamic that Brooke has created within her family that I really see as remarkable and an aspirational one where everyone can speak their minds and they can disagree with each other and push back and even challenge each other's thinking, but they're doing it in a loving, respectful way. And I think you see all of that happening. And then you even see Brooke, hearing her daughter's point of view, but also maintaining her own truth about it and her own experience, which is different than you might think. And so I just thought that was, in a world where so many families either sort of just swept under the carpet and not spoken of, or it could be hostile, screaming, like estrangement is more and more, this was just such a remarkable dynamic to see. And I think a testament to, although Brooke has achieved so much in her career, of course, but like personally, that, she grew up with so many challenges, but has created this kind of family environment to live in is like the biggest triumph of all to me. But then, this kind of bigger discussion that her daughters are such, I think, voices for their generation in a lot of ways, but in terms of what parents can take away from it, one thing for me is that I think that teenagers are going to post what they're going to post on social media. They're just trying to feel good about themselves in the framework they've been given, and they're responding to the images they see around them. Most teenagers are imitating what they see in ads and movies and in TV. So I hope that parents can look at, and people who are making ads and movies and TV, like all of us, what are we showing? How do we represent sexuality? How do we represent femininity? And are we really showing a lot of different things, the whole possible range of human sexuality, for example, or are we only showing like a very narrow sliver over and over again? So I hope that adults who are making those images in media that younger people are responding to in a lot of ways are asking themselves questions about that after seeing this.
Um, I think, I mean, that was such an extraordinary moment for us as a family, and no prompting. And I wrestled with, do I feel proud? What is that? But I wasn't. I was. I felt proud because you're proud of your girls, your babies. You're just look at them growing up, but I was so thankful that I had set up the relationship and the communication such that I I I learned from them. And that was not an experience that I had. It was always, I was just told what to do, what to think, what to feel. And I've worked very hard. And I think the parents, they don't, it's scary to listen to your kids because it's scary to see them as independents and arguing with you and disagreeing with you after their whole lives. They have done, hopefully, pretty much what you said and the rules, and this is what you do, and this is what you're eating, this is when you're going to bed, this is everything. And then to sort of put yourself in a position to relinquish that type of a relationship and that type of power, I think parents would be really, really surprised at how much their children can teach them if they're open and willing. So I hope that they look at that and know that I'm just another mom, and I'm trying to blunder my way through it to the best, but they are their own women and they do have their own agency and they're finding it earlier. And we need to nurture that because it doesn't matter. At the very, very least, you've engaged with your loved ones. And no matter how fraught it might be, that is a huge, huge form of love by listening.
Yeah, you are a really cool mom, in my opinion.
The best parent ever. I mean, you really, really are. It's
I,
incredible.
I mean, I think we're just having children. I mean, Lana has a beautiful little baby girl.
I'm learning from,
Happened
if
during
I
the
could
movie.
be 10% of the parent you are, that would be a miracle. I mean, it's really amazing to hear you talk about it.
So how did they react when you first, Lana, was it was your idea to set up that scene, or how did that evolve? And
It was,
were they just kind of
yeah.
like nonchalant, sure, we'll do it, or did you have to prepare them, or can you talk about that? Because I mean, it's just such
Yeah.
a pivotal scene.
It was really just, they weren't doing like interviews for the documentary or anything like that, Brooke's daughters or her husband. And it was really just with the idea of, I think I'd edited much of the film already. And I always knew from the beginning that I hoped we could see just a little bit of Brooke's daughters at the very end of the film, because I think when you go on this journey with Brooke and her relationship with her mother, and then going through this experience of postpartum depression, coming to the end and getting to just see her daughter as, almost grown up themselves, I thought that would be incredibly powerful, even if it's only a visual moment, and to get a little sense of the whole family dynamic that Brooke and her husband Chris have created, that would be great. But I didn't have expectations for it beyond that, really. Of course, I thought, oh, it would be great if it became something more than that, but you never know. So we were filming like a day or two of observational footage in Brooke's life, just what's she up to, following her around here and there. And at the end of the day, she was having dinner with her family. And they were all okay with being filmed just for this one dinner. And all I said was, right as we were setting up, I just said, have you guys seen any of your mom's early films? And then they just started talking, and it was almost like, lighting a match and like the fire, and then it was a small crew, it was just me and two other people. We really just stood back and kind of, I often do not feel like I'm melting into the wall. I often feel very present and kind of awkwardly intrusive. But in this case, I actually did feel like I disappeared in a way. And the conversation just took off. And one of those moments where I think by being there filming something, you're kind of imbuing an evening or a meal or a conversation with meaning, like kind of putting a frame around it that might not be there. And that was really it. They just had this whole incredible talk themselves. Brooke, I'm curious what it felt like for you. I don't know if it
I
felt
mean,
like
I was
all on
blown
your
away by their ability to voice their opinions, and that they had thought about it, and that they came back with questions, and they challenged it. And I said, oh my gosh, you're going to be okay in your life. Like, you're going to be okay in the world, because you've got your feet planted. And I was so happy that they didn't get all dolled up, or, that they were just really their authentic selves. And the love the love they have for their mom, their mother, but also the wanting to, the burden isn't on them to just protect me. They want me to be safe, but they also want me to be able to find my own strength within me. And I think that's, we don't want to see, our parents. It's interesting, we to have had this whole existence, but they really just didn't, they're not very cognizant of it. um they're more impressed that there were TikTokers on at the end of the movie or something, that rather than the whole history of my career. That really impressed them. But it just made me feel so good, because I thought, oh, what more can you want but dialogue with your children? Like, what do you think? Teach me about yourself. Like, to learn about them as women, as individuals, not as my babies. Or it just felt so full circle. And funny. I mean, we're a funny household, so there was a lot. We thought it was just going to be B-roll, basically. You know, I mean, this might be one of the only times I can get Greer to do the dishes, but that was that was pretty impressive.
That was the only performative aspect of it.
Yes.
The
Once she goes,
dishes.
she's good at disappearing when it's time to do the dishes.
That's hilarious. So now I want to jump to the beginning of the movie, and specifically just even talking about the title that you chose, Pretty Baby Brooke Shield. I mean, it's multi-layered the title. I think it's brilliant. But Lana, how did you settle on that title for the
To me,
project, or
it
what
was
was
always the only possible title. really. I mean, it said everything. It is layered, and that it's kind of how Brooke arrived on the global stage in a way. It's about what she represented at the time, but it's also about, who she was and what she had to kind of grow out of and transcend also. So I think it was always the working title, and then it became like, well, I think this is the title. And there was a bit of a question about which should come first, Pretty Baby or Brooke Shields first. And I like having Pretty Baby first because I think it's more provocative that way. Like, oh, what? And I think that in itself also suggests that it's Brooke's story and a bigger cultural story. So it was just, yeah, it always seemed right from the start.
Yeah.
Perfect. So in the film, there's a moment, or that Drew Barrymore is talking about, when the film went to Cannes, and she says, she talks about when you're living a public life, it kind of requires this acceptance of no boundaries. And I think that's really counterpointed by, what we hear Brooke say at the end of the film about, there's this commodity that is Brooke Shields, but that, I go home afterwards. I can separate the two. Do you think things have changed, or how have things changed for young performers today in terms of that kind of awareness that's maybe more present in our culture, or not? Do you disagree
I
with
don't
me?
think there's as much separation. I mean, for me, I knew I needed to do that to survive, and not, I needed, I couldn't have crossover like that. I didn't know where it left me. It felt like it left me just alone and hanging. So I compartmentalized and sort of shut that down. That was just a job. It wasn't my life. And then I had my high school friends, my friends, and my real life. And it was easier for me to not get confused by my professional life as having anything to do with me in a way. And I could go to my home, and my home was my friends. And I don't think that that's as much a part of the conversation in today's world, where everything is a TikTok, everything is an Instagram post, and everything is preserved and filtered, and our food is photographed, and the access is constant, and it's, you let them into your home, you let all of the outside come into your home, and that was never comfortable for me. So I think it has changed, but I'm just not so sure for the better.
Right. And because everyone is on social media. So even if you're not an actor or a public presence in any way, you often have a persona, your social media personality. I mean, I know so many people who are like school teachers, and they wrestle with the gap between the projection of themselves publicly and who they really are. Like, it takes a little bit of a psychic toll on anyone in the way, because you're right, we have this forward facing, more performative version where in a way you're kind of commodifying, yeah, inside your house and what you eat and all of that. But it's to try to express who we are, to get acceptance for who we are privately.
Mm.
Well, I mean, and the word influencer is such an interesting word, because I don't know how authentic it is a lot of the time, because it becomes about numbers, and it becomes about all of that. And it must be really, on the one hand, empowering. And I really did take to heart the comments from the girls about making them, that they feel good about the way they're presenting themselves, and it's with makeup, and it's, in the way that they feel they want to. And I struggle with all of it, but there's also this, everybody is influencing each other, but there's no kind of like, there's no real authority anywhere, or no
Mhm.
sort of code, or a moral standard or something that you can kind of bounce it all off of. And it just must be really, or there is too much, but it must be very confusing to kids today too.
Mhm. Yeah. And you were like, the original lifestyle influencer in a way. And that I think about that book On Your Own, part two is bookended by two books that Brooke wrote. The first one, she tried to write, but then it was taken away from her and ghostwritten. And that was so obsessed with every detail of your lifestyle. You know what I mean? Like exactly what you eat, what you wear, a list of items in your closet, every single detail of living, breathing, eating, sleeping. Eat carrots and celery, But then your book that you really wrote, Down Came the Rain, was a real look at your lifestyle, but the complete opposite, like this raw, candid, brutally honest, nothing, glossed over in any way book. And that's what was so remarkable about it. And that change from the book that opens part two and the book that comes towards the close of part two, I think just says so much about your journey.
Absolutely. It was all you.
So on this theme of then and now, one of the things in the documentary that just surprised me and well, shocked me actually was all the archival footage of the talk show hosts and just the kind of incredibly what feels like cringy questions now. I mean, there was one moment where that interviewer actually asked Brooke, why do you love your mother? I mean, like, what a question. Like,
Yeah, you're
like,
right.
what kind of, I just, but what I think that it's so illuminating about, where the culture was, during that time. But how has that changed for young performers today, or has it? And I'm also like super nervous asking this question because I'm interviewing you. Hopefully not asking anything so horrible.
No, I mean, on the one hand, it's not acceptable today, which is changed, I think is different. And they would not get away with being able to talk and interview a child like that anymore. We didn't have a publicist that would step in front of the camera and take us out and protect us, so that I think the rules are a bit better now for younger people professionally. For me, I'm not so sure that it truly has personally changed, but I've become sort of more formidable, and therefore I don't stand for it anymore. I'm not backed up in the corner and up against the wall. You can't really throw me, but I'm gonna redirect if it's not going in the way that I want it to go. And that's what needed to change for me, even more than pointing the finger at how crazy and inappropriate it all was. It's very important to highlight it, but my journey was about my fighting back against it.
Yeah, and Brooke, you in interviews, I was just remember after graduating Princeton, especially, it is so different. You sit differently in the chair.
My voice is different. My actual voice is different. Yeah.
And Lana, how did you decide to kind of focus on those clips? Was there what were you kind of thinking in terms of wanting to, like, I mean, there's actually, I feel like there's more talk show clips than there is even kind of discussion of what Louis Malle or Zeffirelli might have been thinking psychologically, like.
Yeah. Well, I loved the talk show material in part because Brooke was often on these shows with her mom. And to me, this is such an important relationship that shaped Brooke's life and who she is in so many ways. Terry is gone, obviously. So, how to create a really rich three-dimensional sense of this person who's no longer here. And when I first started looking at the footage, I was really struck by what you could see happening between Brooke and her mom within those two shots. Often Terry saying something and Brooke kind of like looking to the side, just all these little glances, especially when Brooke's younger and really nothing is hidden on her face, seeing her reactions to both the interviewer's questions, but also to her mother and to the back and forth. Like there's a clip that ends part one where I think the interviewer says something to Terry, it must be hard for your child, it's when your child grows up and become an adult, that's a hard thing for them to become an adult. And Terry starts to answer, then Brooke cuts in, she's age like 18. It's like, I think it's harder for the parent. And that to me indicated where their relationship was going. So for me, I love that stuff because you're looking for these little behavioral tells, even if they're not directly stated in words, because so often people are not saying exactly what they mean, but you're looking for these cues in their body language and their behavior that indicates the subtext or what's really going on beneath the surface. And that for me was almost like verite footage, and that it was material to do that. And then the other part of it is that, yeah, the questions that are being asked, I think do reflect American society's view of what Brooke Shields, the symbol, meant at different times and the different moral values they were putting on it at different times. And very often you see the interviewers not really interested in what Brooke's answer is and not really listening to her, but more just, wanting to make a point or kind of pigeonhole her into a certain position. So that was the other layer of those talk show interviews that I really loved working with.
I'd never watched them back. I would do shows and just I would never watch them. And so to see, you can see where I'm clocking out. You can see in
Mm.
this little face, like you said, that's not hiding anything. And but fiercely wanting to stick up for my mother and protect my mother. The fact that I interrupt in that later interview as I'm 18, I would have never interrupted my mother. You
Yeah.
just, that was a no-no. You didn't do that. And so the fact that I was physically trying to, okay, I'm going to assert it here. And I mean, little baby steps, but
Or one of my favorite interviews, the two of you in the film, is when you've just started at Princeton and someone's like, how often do you call your mom? And you're like, 5 times. It's like, oh, 5 times a week. And then your mom's like, no, 5 times a day. And like that, just these moments that are so rich and say so much about the relationship and how it changed.
absolutely.
So Brooke, at the very top of the interview, I'd asked you about, why now, and you had said that, it just felt right, and felt so much trust with Lana, and just gave over control. Now listening to you talk now, what was your first, what surprised you the most when you saw the first cut, or like when you saw this together, like what was your first
I
thought when
I
you
was just I was so very relieved that the complexity of the relationship with my mother, my relationship to myself, to the industry, to my craft. I was so relieved that it was all out there to be seen and to be thought about, but not it didn't dictate how we're supposed to feel about my story. Lana does a beautiful job of just this here it is. Now make it spur conversations in yourself, and with and I that was just a really important piece for me because I'm a lot of different things. We all are. And there's so much that's relatable to people in different ways from this story. It could have been, I did not anticipate it with Lana, but in the wrong hands, this could have been very one note, very tabloid, very sensational. And it doesn't have a hint of that. And it really, it has this space to really experience. And I was just so, I was honored. Nobody fell into the old pattern of beating Terry up, you know, and 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 I think that what was amazing to me too with the conversation with the girls was they're defending their mother, and I no longer have to because I'm their mother. And when we were talking about it, there was a shift in my psyche that sort of thought, okay, you don't have to justify and defend her the way you've done for the majority of your life. She's okay. And I mean, I made this decision sort of once I started having kids, but but it was really important to me that the message of the documentary, I'm actually living it right now. I'm 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 carrying myself differently, and I'm giving myself more credit, and I'm believing in myself more. And it's been because of this documentary. I'm prouder than I ever have been. And to be able to be proud and still excited to do what I do professionally is is quite amazing.
That's absolutely thrilling. May every may every documentary subject have that the same experience. That's such a beautiful answer.
I didn't expect it, you know. I thought I was just gonna go, phew, okay, good. We saw all of it. But go back and see the little baby girl and see that and see her trying. There's something in there, and she's trying to hold it all together and in and not let it get the best of her, you know, and I'm just so happy for her, you know.
And Lana, last question for you. Now that the film has premiered at Sundance and is streaming on Hulu, like what has surprised you most about the reactions that you've gotten?
It's been really overwhelming and amazing. And I think it's just really struck a nerve, you know? I mean, I am just being flooded with responses. And I think what's so cool about it is that everyone finds something different to connect to in it. And in a way, the film is a little bit like looking in a mirror at yourself because it kind of reflects you in this interesting way. That's what I've noticed with audience responses, where it's just so rich. Some people might say, you know, I had this experience of never feeling connected to my own sexuality because I was afraid of what people thought of the way I looked in my body. Or someone else might say, you know, I have a parent struggling with addiction and I've been grappling with that my whole life. But overall, just this mix of yeah, how people can feel disturbed by some things, but ultimately it's this really triumphant story. Like I think that is really coming across. And I just, so it's been an amazing response, and I'm just loving hearing all of the different perspectives on it.
Well, thank you both so much for your generosity today, and congratulations once again on the film. And thank you to Hulu for giving us this opportunity to talk. So on behalf of Doc NYC Spring Showcase, thank you, Lana Wilson and Brooke Shields. All the best to both of you.